Well, hello. Welcome back to my cellar. I'm back, stronger than ever. Isn't this amazing? I was gifted with a pair of these earlier today from Jim and Scott Wampler. I think Scott makes this kind of stuff on consignment. It's really, really nice leather work. It's nice construction, nice leather work. Has two dragons, and then my initials in silver. Sweet. Like I said, I think Scott might do stuff like this on consignment. So, let me know if you're interested. I'm just tickled. I just got it a little while ago. So I got to take it off, though. Not used to wearing leather bracers. But I can see why, now, really, truly, I can see why having bracers can add one to certain armor types. I certainly can. I did. All right, okay. Been a couple of weeks. I'll talk all about the trip at the end, okay? Regarding vendor sales at the convention, there's 2 or 3 things that might contribute to this. Online crowdfunded projects. I see a lot of people going this route. The latest phenomenon is Trench Crusade. Customers are directing their money into products that are basically digital only. PDF manuals, STL 3D printed, nothing for a brick and mortar to sell. If the disposable income is going that route, it has to hurt the vendors, increasing direct-to-consumer sales of even physical products. Even the big guys go this route. Every sale they make through the web store is a sale that the local shop didn't get. Oh, Games Workshop. A market flooded with new products. Hardly a day goes by when my YouTube feed doesn't feature some new historical board game, skirmish-level tabletop rule set with accompanying models, or new sci-fi or fantasy RPG. Again, the disposable income is being divided into smaller units by the huge variety of products. That's a very, very good point. And I also like to say that I got to figure out what YouTube feed you're doing, because I haven't seen any new historical board games in a long, long time. There's a lot of things contributing right now, besides what you mentioned, which are all very valid points and very important contributors. But there's also a lot of economic instability and uncertainty going on, and it's not likely to ease up anytime soon. So I can understand where gamers are being just a little more careful. Case in point, one of the tourist trap shops I was in Alaska had these amazing gold dice. They weren't all gold. They were amazing. And I go, no, dice, come on. What are you thinking? And then they're all 6-siders. Clink. I didn't need them. They were amazing dice. But I didn't need them, so I didn't buy them. I don't know. Enjoy your vacation. I lived in Ketchikan and Anchorage for several years in the 80s. Great whale watching in the glacier at Valdez is pretty impressive. Sad to hear about the vendors. Expect you're right, and disposable income is less than it was. I was originally going to be in your game at WizardCon and run some games, but I had to cancel. I let Don know months in advance, so I hope it wasn't my games folks were missing. I don't know. The oddest quirk about that con and the attendance was that they were paid attendance that didn't show up. So the convention got the money, but people didn't show up to play the games. Odd result. I haven't had a chance to talk to the WizardCon people since then to brainstorm what may or may not have happened. Enjoy your well-earned vacation. We can manage without the Cellar for a short while. Thank you for your honesty and candor when responding to our questions. Were you still employed at TSR as D&D spread out past the U.S. and Canada? I'm curious as to how non-American influence affected the path. I was marginally. We were shipping copies of the game to Great Britain, and they were being distributed by distributors, whatever the business model was at that time. TSR signed a contract with Games Workshop. At the time, I was importing White Dwarf magazine for the States, and they got together and they signed a deal, and they took over the distribution. They were going to print them in the Great Britain, and they got to do a book. And the book was the British Monster Manual. I'll think of the name in a minute. And it soon became apparent that British humor and American humor differ greatly, and I'm not being offensive to either side. They're different. I like some British humor, and some I think is silly. And I have had English friends tell me the same about what they like and don't like about American humor. The British, what was that? I'll think of it in 20 minutes. Anyway, it was perceived as being fairly silly by a lot of people for the flumph and some of those silly monsters. And I didn't care for it myself. That's all I can say. I didn't care for it myself. I don't believe it sold all that gangbusters. And everybody's contractual arrangements were met. And then I really had no more influence with that. I don't think we were even doing, I was even doing White Dwarf at the time. I can't remember. Sorry, don't remember. I'll opine that you're referring to woke, woke, woke. I agree. I'm an old player who loves first edition. But most old folks who think 5e is woke aren't the target market anyway. Good point. We have the older editions and the knowledge. We're not the ones buying all of the stuff and engaging in the newness of the latest edition. That's for the new players. And they should have the game the way that's fun for them. Absolutely. Whatever floats your boat. I like what I like. I don't denigrate what other people like. I do take shots at the system, the mechanics, the skeleton. Not the fun and the enjoyment in that part. The construction. Anyway, that's what we did back when we were the nerdy/satanic outsiders. I haven't played 5.5e yet, but I enjoy 5e when I convince my son to DM. Great. I'm still trying to get this thing at the library off the ground. And I'm not going in and telling them we're going to play D&D. I'm going to go in and tell them we're going to play a Let's Pretend game. Let's all pretend we're these people. We're all going to do it. Don't be shy. Let's do it. And then I'm going to try and lead them through some fun, playing their, being their pretend people. Whatever's fun. D&D, Shadow Dark, Mutant Crawl Classics, Dungeon Crawl Classics, whatever floats your boat. Gary and I started the snowball rolling downhill that has led to all these wonderful options by making sure the rising tide lifted everybody's boat. Okay, here is one of my more interesting frequent commenters. What if Hasbro suddenly tanked and somehow Cory Doctorow, Canadian sci-fi author, tech activist, coined the phrase "enshittification of the internet"? Oh, I like the phrase. Obtains ownership of D&D. I see. We're going into deep fantasy now. What if Doctorow wants to make a theme park about D&D, offering you the role of consultant for 3 or 4 rides, for a tidy sum, including your payment-free VIP travel and accommodations, to as many conventions as you want for yourself and 5 others for life? Boy, we just dove off the high dive into the 22-foot end, didn't we? Okay. Run through your directions in terms germane to each of the following ride proposals. The first ride commemorates TSR's rise and fall. Wild Mouse. A self-contained, all-metal, small coaster that you saw in carnies in parking lots with carnivals and whatever. Wild Mouse. A lot of fun. Wild Mouse. The second ride observes WotC's period of ownership. The third delineates the pratfalls of Hasbro's enshittification. And the fourth ride lays out your vision to the future. Okay, second and third. WotC's period of ownership. Something that's got some thrill in it, and a couple of gut-wrenching, jaw-dropping, stomach-clenching drops. Something like the Beast at Kings Island. But, it would be a wooden coaster, because nothing feels like a wooden coaster. And it would be more than just normal ups and downs. You might get wet or have air blown on you or something like that. Third, the pratfalls of Hasbro's enshittification. Well, that I would take you right up to the top of a real high tower and put you in a little capsule and drop you over the edge into a big pool of water. Splat, it's over. What? What'd you do? And if I ran things, you'd be in an enclosed capsule, slightly reclining seats, virtual reality headset, just riding a gentle ride all around the park and just seeing great art. Hope I had a fun Alaska-ing. Can I see? No, I didn't see Russia from her porch. Didn't see her porch. I found my sea legs where I left them. No, I didn't. It's funny. It took me the last day of rough seas to get back to it, and then for 2 days afterwards, it was like I'd been. Yeah. The age probably has something to do with it. I had fun writing this loony question. Hope you had fun reading it. Well, it's an interesting concept. The phases. Okay, another question from an old timer. I've got people playing an AD&D 2nd edition campaign. The one thing I find I've kind of scaled back is the quantity of treasure, particularly in the form of coins and gems that the players find, wanting to avoid the infamous Monty Hall syndrome. Trying to use the original XP award system, which had leaned pretty heavily on XP being rewarded for treasure found, the speed of characters advancing in levels at the higher the third plus is getting pretty slow. Currently, I'm trying to award more XP for defeating monsters and or solving problems than the books recommend. Lately, I've been considering scaling the XP advancement charts back instead, sort of dropping the points needed by 25% or more to make up for the somewhat less treasure the players are finding. So, to sum up my long-winded question, is the real problem that in later editions various RPGs level advancement just became too fast and easy? Yes. Should I pretty much stick to the XP charts in the books and make it clear to the players that they're not going to level up after only 1 or 2 sessions? Probably. Or was the XP level progression designed with an expectations of players finding huge hordes of treasure and therefore needs to be adjusted downward if the DM is more miserly? Yes, probably. Good, you bring up an excellent point. Economy is an underlying spine of a campaign. If you look at it in one aspect, you cause wild inflation if the adventurers bring back enormous sums of money, particularly specie, silver and gold. Specie can wildly inflate a local economy and lose value quickly. Something's only worth something if it's scarce. The problem with finding enormous sums of money is the expectation. If you start your campaign in your mind, your rules, your book, I'm not talking about the players, your strategy, figure out the price of an egg. Set the price of an egg. Set the price of a inexpensive meal in an inn or a tavern. Bowl of porridge and some watery beer. Whatever. Set the price there. I like to look at certain periods of the Old West in the United States where you could get a really fine lunch and a beer for a dime. I tend to use coinage values the same as our coinage. 10 pennies, 5 pennies nickel, 10 pennies dime, and up. And that's where I stake it. If you look at, as an example of what you don't want to happen, look at what happened to gold rush prices. San Francisco or any of the big gold rush towns, several of which I recently visited briefly. When back in the lower 48, a dozen eggs was a quarter or 20 cents. And that 20 cents bought enough flour to make 6 or 7 loaves of bread. You have to start at that basis. What does it cost to get by? And now, if you've established that you can get a decent lunch and a decent mug of ale for a silver piece, at least palatable, you've established a basis for, okay, now, if you find you and your two buddies find 100 silver pieces. That's 33 lunches apiece. Or other things that they can spend. If you put enormous amounts of treasure in, you'll skew everything. Use the books to help you establish prices for basics. Poles and ropes and crap like that, whatever chart you use. But in terms of loot for the adventurers, what are they going to spend it on? Food and lodging. I don't care how small the burg, if they make a big score and go live like kings for 3 weeks, word's going to spread and people are going to come to take it from them. Take it from them. Why not? So now you're going to pare down the actual species that you provide for finding. You can ramp it up in goods. They somehow find a bolt of the rarest Stygian silk, still intact, worth a buttload. Now they got to figure out how to haul it out on their shoulder. And they can't sell it to just anybody, because not just anybody will have the money. So now they got to go find somebody to sell it to. Whole new round of interaction you can do with the group as they go to sell stuff like that. I'm a bastard when it comes to leaving specie in the dungeon, because I'm real stingy with gold, pretty stingy with silver, and I am the fount of generosity with copper. I wrote an adventure, may or may not have been published, I don't remember, and they found the remains of a temple and a few gold pieces and some silver. And the previous looters had not been able to haul off the several thousands, tens of thousands of copper pieces. Now, if you had a way to haul it off, it's a pretty good haul after you convert it all in that. But there again, you get to that inflationary thing. All of a sudden, copper is cheap, and a mug of ale that costs 5 coppers now costs 15 because you put money in. You can do that. That's a good way to take away money. However, I prefer not to put in money. I do prefer to be, in place of, more liberal or more generous with experience for feats. And I don't mean lifting up the tree to get, I mean good things they did. Good idea. I take note of it. And when it came time, I'd make sure that there isn't something in there for that. No, don't change the levels. They're up in high numbers for a reason, but you can help them get there faster. You can substitute specie for experience, good ideas, good play, good attitude. If we look at experience, by definition, experience, what we feel, what we see, what we hear, what touches us, what we touch. Way back in the day, experience awarding was stupidly complex, dividing by levels and all this kind of stuff. But by the time we got to first edition, it was like, these are guidelines. They're guidelines. If you think, all right, take whatever an ogre is worth, a standard healthy ogre, but you give him a weapon, or you give him a spell, or some edge. Well, you're not gonna just give them whatever experience an ogre's worth. Jack it up. Give double. They'll want to go out and kill stuff. Track stuff down. Rather than trekking through dungeons, find things for them to do outdoors. Outdoors should be experience laden. Anyway, that's just my opinion. It's your campaign. Never forget. So I've got people playing an AD&D 2nd edition campaign. Oh no, that's a repeat. What happened? What happened? Oh, okay. I double printed part of it. All right. What is your take on the new situation with Judges Guild and city-state of the Invincible Overlord? All right. My take. Bledsoe Jr. has revealed himself in the past and still seems to espouse Nazism. And I don't use that word lightly. He's proven himself to be a rather unpalatable and disreputable figure in the minds of most people. 10 years ago, there was a big Kickstarter, $86,000 raised or something, that fell flat on its face, and everybody wants to know where the money went. Now there's deals in play with other parties, other companies, to reprint stuff or convert it to a newer edition. And that's hanging fire for some reason. Third party says, Nazi says, I get some of that. And the other party says, no, you're not. So they're arguing. It's all a shame. A crying shame. I still feel, all these years later, that the package that came out with the label of the city-state of the Invincible Overlord was and is the best module, as we call them, the best package for playing and playing and playing and playing and playing. It's all there. If I bought it and started a campaign again, there it is. Everything I ever need. I don't have to draw out the caverns, the yellow. There was a little sub-adventure to the Dwarven Caverns where they mined gems. It was a gem. Money's exchanged hands. Licenses have been issued. A lot of stalling and hanging fire going on. And maybe someday something will happen. Maybe. I don't see inside the heads of the parties. One of them I wouldn't want to see inside of. It's a crying shame, because if someone simply reprinted, took the time to scan all the pages, etc., just reprinted the very first edition that came out, players of the old school like myself would snap them up just to have one again. Just to have one again. All right. Now this comment question comes from another source. It came to me through Facebook because I mentioned at one time dealing with large groups of players, and asked if I'd elucidate. And I said I would. Here. So I am. Pardon me. Couple of things. Your setting has to be large enough to accommodate a large number of players. You can't have 16 players on a dungeon crawl, clattering in each other. Tail end Charlie's getting eaten, and the people in the front don't even know it. It's impractical. The first time I was caught with this problem, I had created for myself a giant city using a program in the game called Age of Wonders, and printed it out in several sheets and taped them together and everything. And in my head, I knew where everything was, where the gnomes lived, where this was. I had designed it as a junction type city, very cosmopolitan, trade from all directions, all centered here, big enough to support enclaves of just about every known race that traded. So I had this, literally I had it in my briefcase. And I said, okay, here's what's happened. You guys were hired, and I made up a quick scenario about being hired to guard this theft-proof warehouse who somehow got broken into anyway because somebody tunneled up from underneath, and your shit's in the fire. And so you got to figure out what happened. Okay, so, and they talked to themselves, and I showed them the map. All right, these three said, okay, we're going over to the marketplace and ask questions. And a couple of us says, okay, we're going over. And they broke themselves up into groups to go ask pertinent questions to find out how this had happened, who might have perpetrated it, and how to retrieve what had been stolen, which was the last known barrel of Toby's long bottom leaf. And as I was assigning them, I made shit up as I came back around. Those that went to the marketplace, yeah, they saw a bunch of small people in cloaked and hooded and whatever at dusk a couple of nights ago, and so I gave them something to follow up on their own. I had them all engaged. I ended up with 3 or 4 callers, however many groups they had broken up into, and they all come back. And they pulled their information, and they figured out, okay, it was a band of hobbits who had come into the area about a week previously, 10 days before it happened, who had tunneled from way over here, underneath, gone up, and stolen the last keg. And eyewitness reports saying that, yes, they had seen a bunch of little short people with hoods and in cloaks, hoodies, that had been seen scurrying one night late across the anyway, with poles on their shoulders carrying this big silvery ornate keg-shaped device. And so I gave them little clues here and there, and they figured out, okay, this is who did it. Let's go find the hobbits, yada da da da. And they ended up getting it back before the gold that they'd been paid with blew their legs off, because now they couldn't take it out of their pouch or their pockets because it had been ensorcelled, and it ensured that they did what they were hired to do. And we had a great time. We played for 3-4 hours as a pickup game at a con. The other way, if you're not going to use a huge metropolitan area for a metropolitan mystery, it's not always about killing shit, remember. You can do it outdoors. I know. On one hand, there's the old axiom, never divide the party. But a big party begs to be divided, just not as much outdoors, depending upon how you have how hazardous you've made the outdoors. Bigger parties are better. How many facts you have to find out? Smaller parties. to handle large groups, you break them up. And it works for me. It has worked for me. I can't promise it will for you or anybody else, but that's how I do it. I get in this, I feel like a trader on the stock floor. I'm sending them out, and you found out this, and you found out that, and you found out, and I'll never be able to do a big group the way Bill Webb does, or the way I'll think of his name in a minute. Matt Finch does, because they're almost doing theater. Mine is more ad lib. It works. Try it. You find yourself with a big group, or you give them a big job, mostly out in the open. Now, that can be outdoors. It can be in cleared land. It can be in farmland. You know, the terrain. But if they don't want to break up, well, then treat them like a platoon. You can use big groups outdoors. It's very difficult, much more difficult to have big groups indoors, underground. Very, very, I have found, much more difficult. All right, now, I was gone. And, by the way, I might be gone again because I'm having a procedure next Thursday that supposedly I'll be fine. If not, I won't be here. And I may do it a day late and you'll never notice, but I don't know. I'm just saying now that I have a cardiac procedure I'm going to undergo. So, where was I? North to Alaska. I'll tell you, look, if mountains ever become desirable real estate, Alaska is going to be the trillionaire state. Mountains, mountains, mountains. Now I understand. I was along the coast and that we went up the Inner Passage. After all these years, Cheryl finally got me back on a boat, and what's that? Oh no, I can't remember. I can't read it, so I don't know what it means. She got me back on a boat, and it was it was the far side of the moon compared to my experience on boats. It was amazing. The wait staff was amazing. Every cabin had a butler. Not each cabin, one butler each, but there were butlers assigned to a handful of cabins that took immaculate care of you. We had hot or cold, whatever we desired, breakfast in the cabin every morning on linens, on china with fine, nice silverware. I can see how if you do that frequently, you gain a lot of weight. The restaurants were amazing. The boat was stunning. However, it paled in comparison to what we were seeing. Alaska is amazing. The Mendenhall Glacier is huge. We cruised the Hubbard Glacier. It's so big, you just sail by it for most of a day. We went to Saskatchewan. No, not Saskatchewan. Ketchikan, Skagway, Juneau. I'm probably forgetting. We were a new place every day, which is cool. Back on the boat, have dinner on the boat, and the boat's on its way to somewhere else. I like that. No driving. I like that. We first got spoiled doing that with Viking. It was great. We saw lots of wildlife, but it's not like it's crawling with wildlife. It is fun to see bald eagles in the wild, in their nests atop the trees, and the enormous airy nests that they build that end up weighing 1,000 pounds over the years. It's fun watching them dive for fish. We saw parts of whales. We'd see the spout and part of the back where the blowhole was located, but they weren't like jumping up in the air like Pacific Life commercials. They were gray whales, by the way. But occasionally we'd see a tail go up as they dove. So yeah, I can say I saw whales, just not all of them. We saw sea otters distance, just bobbing up and down like furry corks. We saw some enormous sea lions, some of which had pulled themselves up on a floating channel marker, and were just lying there, big sea lions. Saw forest, they're either called forest bison or woodland bison, thought to be extinct until about 100 years ago, when a herd was found wandering the wilderness in Canada, and the U.S. and Canada put their heads together and got on this thing, and they're bringing it back from extinction. Saw a bunch of them. They look like the prairie bison that we're accustomed to. I believe they might just be a tad smaller. Saw moose. Now, you only have to see a moose to know why when you call somebody a moose, you're doing it because he's big. And we saw them just meandering through the bog, munching and browsing and feeding and carrying on. So all that was cool. We took a couple of train rides that were really, really fun. Way up into the mountains on one of them, up above the snow line. And of course, the towns are very similar because they cater to the cruise and tourist trade. The neatest store that we found in all of our stops in Alaska was across the street from the Anchorage Convention Hall, where we were ferried from the boats 2.5 hours away. So our last ferry in the being ferried, not the boat, was a 2.5 hour ride through the countryside, where we saw a lot of these animals. And the driver pointed out that, like Highway 1 through the Keys in Florida, this is the only road that goes to Anchorage. And so, snow, landslide, whatever, too bad. Food doesn't get through, nothing gets through. Amazing country, really nice people. Fun, you meet. We had dinner with the captain second night we were on board, and met a lady from Cleveland who I played trivia every night after that with her, and we did quite well. We went for lunch in Anchorage because we had a several hour wait to be ferried out to the airport, which is cool. We knew it was coming and everything. And there were flaked out people on all the couches and cushions and everything all over that place. Looked like well-dressed homeless people. We walked around it and we found this really tasty sidewalk vendor. Hot dogs and Polish and brats and reindeer and I don't know, it might have been something else. So I had a great Polish. And Cheryl had a great beef hot dog. And we took our chips and our can of pop, and we went over about 50 feet and sat down on this stone wall, and we had lunch with 3 pigeons and a seagull. It was really nice after the go of the last 7 days. It was cool. And then we went over to Wild Scoops, a little hole in the wall, again, across the street from another side of the convention center, a little hole in the wall, and had a Sitka twist. Oh my God, it was good. And then at the end of the street was Kobuk, the store that we found and we loved, and the trip back was awful. No other way to put it. We spent 23 hours traveling. Airplanes, airports, whatever. 23 hours. It was awful. However, I must commend United Airlines. We were booked through United on the return flight. They had a person there with a wheelchair when I landed in Anchorage, and took me to where I had to go to get my connecting flight. Got to O'Hare. There was a person there with a wheelchair. Take me, and it was a long ways. And we had a 3-hour layover, and 5 times they changed my departure gate. And each time, United sent a person with a chair, took me down to the new gate. I mean, the service was perfect. And we were flying coach. I hope I'll be here again next week. If not, soon thereafter. Spring has sprung, and the Curmudgeon's back in his cellar. Dodata Govi. Hello, and welcome to my cellar.
The curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. TSR and fantasy, collection of micro armory, Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Curmudgeon.